the show. Hey, now it's Brace for Impact, and I'm your host, Mike Gilbert, and I'm going solo on that ass, but it's still the same. We're talking TNA wrestling, and man, oh man, do we have a lot to talk about this week. Tons to talk about, and I'm super excited. If you didn't catch it before, I actually dropped like a 35, almost 40-minute rant earlier in the week. I have calmed down since then. So that's either good news or bad news, depending on how you like your Brace for Impact. I also woke up an hour late. I typically do this at six in the morning. I didn't start it until like 2 minutes after 7. So, and for those of you on Patreon, I really appreciate you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being subscribers. I really appreciate you. You guys are the reason why we keep doing this, and that means a lot to me. So, swig of coffee for the Patreon, man. But yeah, man. So before I get into it, I had a hell of a week this week, and it like fucked with my sleep. And I like on Monday I worked from 7 in the morning till midnight, which one of the longest shifts I've ever done. I've done something similar to that, like through like traveling and deployments and stuff like that. But this one was just like the first time since I've been like a dad. So where I literally left my house at 7 in the morning and I did not see it again until midnight. And I was working the entire time. Like it was just one thing after another. And that carried over into the next day. I actually went in. I was supposed to go in like 12 o'clock, like PM the next day. And as soon as I woke up like 8:30 in the morning. And then I get up and they were like, "Hey, don't worry about coming in until after lunch." I was like, "Okay." And sure enough, 10:30, my phone starts ringing, and I'm like working from home at this point. And then Wednesday was like a smooth day, but then Thursday all day, like just one thing after another, like crisis after crisis. And but I got them all scored away, got them all taken care of. Was able to get home on time to do the show. I was a little rattled during the show, during the Mike and JD show, but I thought we had a pretty good show. And yesterday I was able to finish this week's episode of Impact, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I thought it was a very good episode. The video quality was outstanding. The audio quality was awful. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And but first, the Observer came out yesterday, and a lot of people are losing their damn minds over the Rebellion pay-per-view buys. Especially because there's like a discrepancy between the numbers. So, and then some people have been telling me that Dave Meltzer is lying to attack TNA. Like Dave Meltzer has got this agenda out against TNA, which is just horribly untrue. Like just because it's news that you don't like, that doesn't mean it's a lie. It might end up being wrong, but it's not a lie. I can confirm it's not a lie. I don't know Dave, but he and I have enough mutual friends to know that he's not going to lie about that. He might end up being wrong, and I think that's a possibility here because these numbers are a little bit wonky. So basically, what he said is that Rebellion had a 89% drop from Hard to Kill, and the aggregators are not understanding what's going on here, and Dave didn't do a very good job of explaining it. And if I had an opportunity to talk to Dave, I was like, "Hey, when you don't explain these things thoroughly." Right, and TNA is such like low on his priority list. He doesn't really devote too much time to it because his like they actually now have a TNA podcast. Not very good. They have a TNA podcast now, but they don't devote much time to TNA. It's because not many of their subscribers actually care, and I get that. Like JD and I don't devote a ton of time to WWE. Like we don't recap their shows. Like I recapped WrestleMania. And I think I recap Royal Rumble, but that's been like about it. So I get it's because our audience just doesn't care about the blow by blow for WWE. So we only cover like the big stories, but I'm not covering title changes and all that stuff. So I get it. His subscriber base doesn't care, so he doesn't devote too much time. But what happens is because he's the top like news guy in the business. When you don't explain things thoroughly, the aggregators go crazy, and then that makes it seem like you got an agenda, which I know to not be true. I know he does not. So here's what happened. So they said that the television buys. Okay, so get your mind away from streaming. Okay, streaming numbers have not come in yet. So this is television buys, and this is an aggregated, not aggregated, but this is a compilation number essentially, where like an estimate number from different systems, right? And he doesn't have every system. It's, some places are going to be up and down and yada yada yada, but he's got enough numbers where he feels like he can make an estimate, right? So this is an estimated number: 500 television pay-per-view buys. Now, when he does the television numbers, um, streaming buys are typically about 3 times that. So if you look at it, television pay-per-view buys 500, we're probably looking at around anywhere from 12 to 16, 12 to 1800 buys overall. Okay. At this point. So he said that the television numbers are down 89% from Hard to Kill. Now, people were like, Hard to Kill was 66,000. That math doesn't add up. That's because you guys are looking at the wrong number. He's talking television pay-per-view buys. So television pay-per-view buys for Hard to Kill were 22,000, 22,400, something like that. That number also doesn't add up. And why doesn't it add up? Because Dave didn't explain it very well. The 500 number is down from the original number, the first week number that he had for Hard to Kill for pay-per-view buys, which was 3,400. If you do that math, 500 buys, down from 3,400, that's 89%. He didn't explain that. And so now everybody's going crazy. So everybody thinks that he's lying because the math is off. It's not off. He just didn't give you the right denominator. And so that's where we're at. Now, what happened with Hard to Kill was they had 3,400 television pay-per-view buys initially, which was roughly about, anywhere from 9 to 12,000, give or take, including streaming, right? Initially, and then over time they had more and more buys over time because of the buzz that was coming out of the show. Could we see that here with Rebellion? I think that we'll probably get up there in buys. I do. Not anywhere near not anywhere near what they had for Hard to Kill. Because I told you guys 2 weeks ago that Rebellion was ice cold heading in, or yeah, TNA was ice cold heading into Rebellion. I knew this show was going to die. Not only was the product just ice cold, they had no buzz, none whatsoever. None of the matches were all that interesting. We knew that they were going to be good, but everybody has good matches, so who cares? But none of the storylines, except for me personally, I liked the Josh and Hammerstone story. I didn't really care for any of the other storylines. I just didn't. I thought they were just like, okay, but none of it was like must see TV. So it was ice cold. Not only that, AEW had Collision, and they had Rampage, so they did a full 3-hour block, counter programming, unintentional, but it looks like it's intentional. I'm not, they had to move Rampage due to NBA, and that was not helpful to TNA. And a lot of people think that was intentional. I don't know if Tony had the option to move it like up or down on Friday, or move it earlier in the day on Saturday, or move it to another day or whatever. But he chose right up against Rebellion, which is a typical thing because Battle of the Belts has been going up against most Big Four pay-per-views, and then now Rampage went up against the Big Four, including Collision. But look, Collision is every Saturday at that time anyway, so TNA is always going to go up against Collision. So and Hard to Kill went up against Collision, and look what Hard to Kill did. So I don't want to sit here and say that because there was a free 3 hours on TNT that had a significant effect on the numbers. I think the biggest impact on the numbers was that TNA was cold heading into the weekend. They didn't do enough to get people to buy. I don't like making a ton of excuses. Okay, that's just how I live, and you guys know that about me. So why was the pay-per-view down 89% initial from the initial buys? Because they didn't do a good enough job. They're not good enough to be bought. They didn't go out there and hustle and get people to spend their money. That's why. Um, and that's the only way you can look at it. That's the only healthy way to look at it. If you just sit there and throw excuses at failure, you're constantly going to be a failure. You got to diagnose why you weren't good enough and get to the bottom of it and then go get better. Right? If you just sit there and whine and complain, it's like, oh, AEW, AEW was already scheduled for that time. You knew, like, they're scheduled for Saturday at 8 every week, and then your pay per view is going to go up against it. So you know that you got an uphill already. You got to go and get beat. Go ahead and overcome that, like you did for Hard to Kill. Why was Hard to Kill so big? Well, they had a lot of late buys. But initially, like, that was one of the better numbers, 3,400 television. So you're probably looking at 10 to 12,000, right? Watching live. That's pretty good, right? Going up against Collision. So, and I think they had a battle of the belts too. But I do think that we'll get that number is going to jump up probably significantly, but still not going to get anywhere close to Hard to Kill. It's just not. They just don't have the buzz. So, and then the other reason why the number was down significantly, number one reason, they're not good enough to get people to buy their pay-per-views. They're just not. Second, counter programming. Third, the next day was Dynasty, and Dynasty had all the buzz in the world, but Dynasty was still down. Dynasty was down pretty significantly too. I think I don't remember what the percentage was. I didn't really look up those numbers because this isn't a AEW podcast. But they were also down, and I'm sure Rebellion being that weekend was not helpful to them. Although Rebellion did not get that many buys, so it couldn't have been too much of a ding. But yeah, so I mean that's tough. That's tough. But here's why it gets confused. It's previous. So this is an aggregated site, by the way. So it says, as previously reported, the pay-per-view buys for TNA Hard to Kill set a company record with around 66,000 on TV and streaming. However, TNA Rebellion appears to have performed significantly worse. Wrestling Observer reports that Rebellion had around 500 television pay-per-view buys, which is down 83.9% from Hard to Kill. Those numbers don't add up. That's just not true, right? That's not what happened. And I think as someone that uses Dave's News a lot for these podcasts and for my main podcast, I think it's important to try to decipher what he says. But if you have to decipher what somebody says, they're not doing a good enough job either. Dave's got to be better than that. And I don't know. I don't know if he addressed this on his latest podcast with Garrett. They probably didn't even cover TNA. I'm going to listen to it later today when I go for a run. But if what you're saying is that everybody else is stupid, well, that's not good either. It's like a teacher. Like, if none of your kids are passing, your excuse can't be they're all dumb. No, you're not doing a good enough job teaching. So if people aren't understanding what you're writing, it's not because they're dumb. It's because you're not doing a good enough job explaining yourself. And so you got to just be better, right? And I think he knows that. So I hope he knows that. So he's got to be better because he created a mass hysteria, and people are the typical, and they're most of them are like AEW diehard fans, right? And I see them, and I am on a website with some of them. TNA LOL, they're dying. They're such failures. Scott D'Amore. Oh, this is all because Scott. No. There's a lot that went into this. There's a lot of reasons, and what they're gonna do? They're just gonna keep going, right? And then they'll do something great, and you guys won't talk about it, and then they'll fuck up, and you guys will just not stop talking about it for like 2 days, because that's just the type of people that you are. So, but yeah, so that was Rebellion pay-per-view buys. Now ticket sales, I don't think I talked about this on my Rebellion recap, but it's over on YouTube. You guys can check it out. Um, so ticket sales for night one, I think they got in and around 1,100, and that probably number probably got closer to 1,200 with extra late comps and bringing in drunks from the craps tables and people just kind of walking in. So they filled the place up. That I mean, it wasn't as good as hard to kill. Hard to kill was over 1,600. So we knew they weren't going to get back to that, but still, like 1,100 for a TNA show, that's pretty damn good. And I thought that the crowd was lively and they looked great on television. I thought Rebellion was like, as far as a television product, I thought it looked better than anything that they've done in a long time. I just thought they were on point the whole night. Like a lot of their typical mistakes they just weren't making, and they were just on fire. Okay, tapings, different story, but they were on fire. So I thought that looked really good. And then for night two, they had just under 1,000. I think like tickets sold something like that. It was like by bell time it was a little 100, but they were BQ was there and he said that like they started to fill the place up like during the show. So like as the show's going on, because I think it was like a 4-hour taping block, maybe even more. People were just kind of coming in and filling seats and stuff. So they probably sold a bunch of tickets at the door, and then also probably had some freebies. So they probably got close to 1,000 for the ticket. So I think that going forward, the Palms is probably like the top place for them to go for their big shows. I could see them going right back there for Hard to Kill coming up. Montreal is going to be in the Verdun Auditorium, or Slammiversaries in the Verdun in Montreal coming up in July. And this is a rumor, but like nothing set in stone. It wouldn't surprise me if they went back to the Palms for Bound for Glory. But I think a lot of people think they're going to the Hammerstein, and that makes a ton of sense. So I think I would rather see them go to the Hammerstein. We've already seen them at the Palms twice, but I think that them having like an annual tour of Las Vegas would be cool. But they probably, they've done 4 shows this year and all of them were like by TNA standards pretty successful, but each one got lower and lower. So you have to factor that in. So like by the 4th one, they were like half of what they had at Hard to Kill. Because Hard to Kill was at 1,600. So next taping night was like 1,200. Rebellion was about 1,200, maybe less, probably less. And then the taping the next night, like 8 something. So take a look at like Hard to Kill 1,600. Then the fourth live event, like eight something. So you're looking at like half of what you did. So you gotta, even though like that half is still pretty good for what you do normally, you still got to factor that in. So maybe don't go back to the well too many times. That could be tough. All right. So, and the other big news, we had this other big news, and I'm going to get into that. Mike Santana has signed a full-time contract. It was not reported, but speculated that he was probably a per date guy, because he's another guy that's like working everywhere. And he just gotten out of that long contract with AEW. And so I think a lot of people assumed that he was probably a per date guy. So when I saw him come in, I figured he's a per date guy. And in fact, he's already missing Under Siege. He's not going to be there. He had other bookings. But it looks like they were able to get the deal done. Anthony Chon and Ariel Schneier got him in. He is locked in. He is now a full-time talent. I guess once he cleans up some of his dates that he had already booked. But with him being on contract and how he looked at Rebellion, and I thought he looked great at the taping last night too. I thought he looked great on Impact. Guy's just got a lot of energy. He's got top guy energy. You know what I mean? Like there's something about this guy that screams like he could be a top guy in TNA. Not anywhere else. I think TNA specifically, he could be a top guy. Because smaller company. And I think the top talent there are compatible with him. I think he could work well with them. And we saw what he did with Maclin. I thought that was a great match. And honestly, if Maclin probably didn't like knock himself loopy, they probably would have had a much better match. Now, it has not been reported that Maclin got a concussion during that match, but it kind of looked like it. Because then after that, everything got clunky. But even so, I still thought that the two worked well together. And I think we're going to see them working again sometime soon. But the if he's from the Bronx, right? A big New York guy, and I think that if they go into the Hammerstein this year, I think it's a possibility that he's on top with Moose during that, because he's already like behind, like he's right up there with Josh and Nemeth. So they have like their big three baby faces, right? It's Nemeth, it's Josh Alexander, and now it's Santana. And then everybody else is kind of like, you got your like middle tier, you got your PCOs, um, you got Eric Young, guys like that. Everybody else is just kind of like hanging out in the middle card, and some of them might get a title shot, most of them won't, like Jake something, guys like that, Speedball. So, Speedball probably will get a title shot in an episode of television because he can have a good match, like they'll just like, oh, we have Speedball. Let's let him have a good match, So I'd put Santana like already like probably in that number 2 or number 3 babyface role behind. Oh yeah, Broken Matt now. Yeah, and I'll talk about Matt in a minute, but yeah, he's probably like right up there in that top 4 babyface range. Move up and down depending on what they're doing. But if they're gonna go into New York City or at the Manhattan Center at the Hammerstein Ballroom in Manhattan, New York, you got a kid from the Bronx right there that's got a ton of buzz and a ton of energy behind him. You might want to try to go for it. You might want to try to get him in on that main event. Everybody's like, do you see him as an X Division guy? No, I don't. I think he's too big. Not that there's a weight limit, but I look at the guy like he's beefed up, got ab. He was bigger than Maclin, right? And the promos are like outstanding. The guy's he's a passionate guy. I think you go world heavyweight title with him. I don't know if you put the belt on him, but I think that's like he's in that mix. I don't see him mixing it up with fucking Ace Austin. You know what I mean? I think like he's got top guy energy. And I've said that, and that this is not new on this show. I've said that for years about him, even when he was in AEW, and I was super impressed by him whenever he was in TNA. He was just like too skinny, too small. Yeah, it's so funny. Whenever he was in TNA before, he kind of looked like Myron Reed. Like they have like similar look and they had like similar haircuts. And now and then last night they wrestled and it was pretty funny. It was like Santana wrestling his former self, which I thought was kind of a funny visual. But so yeah, Santana is in. I am super stoked about it. I think that they have a guy now that they could probably get behind, a guy that's hungry, looking to rebuild his career, looking to prove a lot of doubters wrong, and looking to establish himself as a main event talent. And he probably knows that the only place he can be able to do that is right here in TNA. And so he is home for a while. Now they said that he signed a contract. Who knows? Like we thought that the Motor City Machine Guns were in for years. And their contract was for a year. so it maybe Santana only signed for 1 year or maybe like 18 months or something like that. So who knows how long he has signed for. If you're a wrestler and you think that you can make it as a top talent, you probably aren't signing a very long-term deal. But if you're TNA, like, you probably should try to get him, on 3 to 5, but he might be signed for anywhere probably for under 3. And that's gonna be tough because they have such a churn. Lots of people coming and going in this company, so it's really hard to keep your established names. You're always plugging holes, right? Or always putting band-aids on stuff, especially on some of these cards. They got like some of them get a little bit weak, but and then the next guy is Steve Maclin. He has re-signed with the company. It is official. It came out on Thursday. He has put pen to paper again. Anthony Ciccione and Ariel Schneer has gotten the deal done. And chalk one up for the new regime. They were able to get Maclin, and a lot of me included, a lot of people thought that Maclin was a goner whenever he leaked that information to Fightful, and it was him. Because guess who got the scoop that he had re-signed? He was live on In the Weeds with Joel Pearl over on Fightful, and they got the scoop. And of course, Sean Ross Sapp had to interject himself and put him in the show, but that's the way it goes. He's the boss, right? So, but yeah, they got the scoop that he had re-signed, and Gerard, big new distribution deal, got the scoop. When asked why Maclin resigned, he said, "Money and freedom." And hell yeah, sir. Fuck yeah. I'm happy for Mac. I'm happy for TNA. Now here's the thing. They re-signed him and they immediately had him job to Santana, so that kind of pisses me off. But they're trying to get here's the structure of the company. The champion is a heel, and so they got to build up contenders for the champion. If the champion were a babyface, you'd probably Maclin goes over because they need contenders for the babyface. But since that champion is a heel, Maclin has got to get the new babyface shined up to go take on Moose down the road, right? And so that's just the unfortunate position he's in. He is not the top heel in the company. He is probably, number 2 behind Moose as far as singles heels. Hold on, swig of coffee for the heels. Oh, check this bad boy out. Yeah, I don't fuck around when it comes to my coffee mug's got a new one. Put my name on that shit. All right. So yeah, Steve Maclin is signed. He's in for a few years, and I think that it is time. The problem is there's only the one championship, and they seem to be focused on the system, and I think they want to try to turn them into the bloodline a little bit. So even though I get the feeling that Josh Alexander is going to get a title shot at Slammiversary, and probably Santana, like if I'm just forecasting, Santana gets a title shot at Bound for Glory. I don't even think Moose loses at either one of those pay-per-views. And so I think they're trying to do like a little bit of a bloodline. They're keeping the system strong, which is good. Problem is, it's just not working. Ticket sales are down. Ratings are in the toilet. Pay-per-view buys down 89%, or 83%, whatever it was. Maybe it'll work later. Maybe you're sacrificing now to get something to work later, but it's not working now. At some point, you got to cut bait and go a different direction. But they're keeping them strong. And so that means Macklin's probably not going to be the top guy there, and I think he should be the top guy. And you guys know this. Like, I've been telling you guys this for a long time. He's that good. He really is. And if they're not going to go with him as a heel, then they need to flip him babyface. And I think once they flip him babyface, I think it's off to the races there, because he's got a lot more charisma than Josh. He does. And his Josh is like the better in-ring worker, but I don't think Macklin's like that far behind him. I don't. I think Macklin's really good. They should have a different style. Josh is like, they get a 5-star match style, and Macklin's is not. Macklin's super intense, right, and makes his shit believable. Like he's a really good wrestler. I think if any company got behind him, he would get over. Just finding the right company to get behind him, and he's here locked in at TNA, and so hopefully they can get their stuff together and really get behind this guy, because I really do think he's got something special. I really do. And maybe I'm just biased. There's probably some of that. And I acknowledge that I have a little bit of bias to not only like I have a little bit of bias towards military guys, but I can also acknowledge that some people just aren't going to make it at the top. Like, like the infantry in AEW, like I like those guys. Right? I probably like them more than most people, and I want to see them get an opportunity. But I also acknowledge that they're probably not ever going to get to the level of the Bucks and FTR, which most teams aren't, and there's been other military guys and girls that have come and gone. Like I knew that Lacey, well, I can't remember what her name was in WWE. She just got fired last year, and she's basically a retiree now. She was a Marine. I knew like I wanted her to get a shot early on, and I started watching her stuff, and didn't take too long for me to realize that, yeah, she's probably not going to be like a top female there. And when she got released, I don't think anybody was all that surprised. So, and I can acknowledge when someone from the military is probably like, I don't need to be die hard for them. But Macklin's, I think he's special. I really do. And he really could be a something for these guys. Like, I think he could be like, right up there with Bobby Roode and James Storm and some of their top, like, and I consider him a homegrown talent, because he just never, like, he had that NXT run. He was there for a while, but that was more like training school. They didn't really do anything with him. He was in like a good tag team, but they never really made it. and they never really gave him promo time, and he didn't really do anything as a single. So I think I think he really is a homegrown TNA talent, as weird as it sounds. But I thought that about EC3 and Eli Drake, even though they came through the WWE system first. I always looked at them as TNA products because that's where they made it. That's where they got over. So that's how I look at Maclin. Um, Now Matt Hardy, he has not re-signed. He has made it very clear to anybody within shouting distance that he is a complete, total, and unadulterated free agent. That said, I don't think anybody takes him on besides TNA. It's very clear that this is the perfect place for him. It really is. I just don't see him going anywhere. And maybe WWE tries to give him another shot, but I think that like if they did, he would probably be a producer or something like that. That's where I see him. I just don't see him like AEW. He said the AEW gave him an offer, but it probably was like they probably lowballed him a little bit because they knew that they weren't interested. He just was never a fit there, and the broken gimmick was never a fit. And Big Money Matt's not a fit. Like Big Money Matt, he was the TNA champion at one point, but the TNA was like on its ass, and it was not like something that was like over. I remember watching some of those episodes because like, oh, Matt Hardy's the champion. Let me check it out because I was kind of out on TNA at the time. And the Big Money Matt wasn't very good. And he tried to bring that to AEW after the bringing the broken gimmick failed. He tried to switch over to Big Money Matt, and that also failed because he was like the private party's manager. And yeah, that just didn't work either because he just couldn't go. And Big Money Matt had small room charisma. It wasn't meant for like the big screen. It just wasn't. It I don't even want to say that it worked in TNA, but it worked enough to get him the title belt. But I just don't. I might have to go back and rewatch some of that stuff, like the stuff before he got broken, because I remember watching it back then. I just didn't think it was very good. I did. But then when he went broken, then he fucking like jumped off the screen as a megastar. And I thought that if once he left TNA and he immediately went into WWE, him and Jeff Hardy both, I thought if they went as the Broken Hardys, that would have been even crazier. But because he had that trademark fight with TNA at the time, he couldn't do it. But I think if they would have went there as the Broken Hardys, because they had so much momentum, like it was 2017 was a wild time in TNA. They were a dying company. But for some reason, this broken thing just blew up. 2016, 2017. It just blew up. And it was over. And everybody was talking about it. And like Matt Hardy was like, he would be on like podcasts in full character. And like like Jericho and like other podcasts, they would just play along. And he would not break character the whole time. And then like him and Jeff would do it too. And they went everywhere, and they went to Ring of Honor and like were super over as the broken gimmick. And like they were selling tickets. They were over. And because they couldn't take the character with them, by the time they got to WWE, they were a nostalgia act. And that flamed out quick because Matt couldn't go. He just couldn't. But that was part of the broken character that worked so well, as he was broken. He could not go. And so I know I ranted on it already earlier this week, but for all the AEW fans that are making fun of TNA for signing or for bringing in Matt Hardy, he was just there in AEW. And when he was there, he couldn't go. And he couldn't go before he signed, right? He just couldn't. And he was on your television teleporting, right? So who are you to make fun of TNA for bringing a guy in that you just had in for like 3 or 4 years, right? That AEW may or may not have given a contract extension offer to that he turned down, which I kind of find that I find that hard to believe, to be honest with you. But I think what he's doing here in TNA is going to be perfect. It's perfect for him. It really is. And I think it's perfect for TNA. I think they have a little bit of juice left in it. It got over to the Vegas audience. Not as over as it was whenever he left. I acknowledge that. But I think once they start ramping up some of the vignettes and they're going to do some House Hardy stuff, I think Ribby's going to get involved, and probably the kids. I think this could be a great thing for the company. Problem is, I just don't want him like around the world title, but I think they're going to do the Moose match. And Dobby the Brain Heenan, and of course, Godzilla and Lucha Doncic and everybody else, they've all taken credit for this idea. I think that Matt Hardy probably gets a title shot at Against All Odds, and but not in Montreal, not in Montreal. I think Moose beats Hardy in Chicago, and then Moose moves on to Josh at Slammiversary. I think that's the play. Because I just don't think you want Matt Hardy on top of a pay-per-view, especially in a building that could hold like up to 4,000 or 5,000 people. They're going to set that thing up for 1,500, by the way. They're going to have that shit tarped off. There's going to be a whole section that no one's going to be able to see on TV. So let's not think that the Verdun Auditorium that, they're like TNA is going to announce a sellout and people like look up the capacity. Sellout is different than capacity, by the way. They're going to look up, it's probably going to be sold out at like 1,500 or something. But, so yeah, I don't think you want to do that because he just can't be counted on to have a good match. But you can do some smoke and mirrors and have a fun thing with System and Moose and do the whole thing in Chicago at Against All Odds. And I think Chicago will be hot for the Broken character. I mean, I'm just predicting it. I don't know for a fact, but they're typically a hotter audience anyway. I think they'll really get behind it. I do. Now this coming up at Under Siege Albany, probably not looking so hot. I don't know. They were pretty dead. And Albany's the crowd that did not care about Bobby Fish. Hold on, swig of coffee for Bobby Fish. So I would be worried about that, but Chicago, I could see them getting really, really behind it, and Against All Odds being kind of a success with Matt Hardy and Moose on top. And then other than that, Crazy Steve is out the door, probably citing budget cuts because he had a tweet. I don't know if it's still up, but he responded to a tweet because TNA fans, now that they have signed Santana and re-signed Steve Maclin, they're saying LOL to the dirt sheets, LOL to the haters. TNA is not doing budget cuts. And then Steve replied to him, was like, actually, they are doing budget cuts because that's probably why he got fired or why his deal didn't get renewed. Even though he was a current title holder, like DMC, but still he was a title holder and they just didn't renew him. So he's gone. And I'm disappointed about that. I might be on the, I might be one of the very few, but I liked Crazy Steve and I liked the position he was in. And I liked the heel turn that he had just did. I thought that was cool. I liked the mask. I liked the music. Like it seemed like they had something going for him, like they had plans for him. But that was the Scott D'Amore regime. And so we're seeing that a lot of these people that the new regime don't really care for, they're letting them walk through attrition, meaning like when their contracts are up, they're just gone. So I would say some of the turnover has been really good, like much needed. And then some I just don't agree with, like Motor City Machine Guns. I felt like they should have fought to keep them. But those guys were due a significant raise and they just weren't going to play ball, I guess. And I think they had their eyes on, other people. But yeah, so they, we're talking, we lost from the beginning of the year or from when Scott D'Amore left, Oleg and Dango. I'm cool with that. And now, Crazy Steve, and then the Motor City Machine Guns, some of those are tough. I like Crazy Steve, but I don't think he was a significant part of the show. I don't think but I do think that like when people go to TNA, like he's kind of one of the guys that, kids would like to see, you know what I mean? He's got a cool character. He's got a cool mask, but I really don't ever think they merchandise very well because I just don't think they have a legitimate merchandise department. I think they have a t-shirt department, right? So they have people that just make t-shirt designs. That's not a merch department, right? So, but when you have a cool mask and a cool character like that, you can monetize that stuff. And I just don't think that they ever did a good enough job. Although I thought Steve did a good enough job of creating the character. So I hope somebody I think he's probably like an NWA guy, especially because I think he's local to Nashville, and I think NWA does a lot of stuff in Nashville. So I can see him going to NWA. And then of course I see him coming back in like a year because Crazy Steve never leaves fully. So he'll they'll do some dates in the South and they'll just call him up, say, hey, can you come in? And he'd probably show up. So I don't think he's gone forever, but he's probably gone for now. And then the Grizzly Young Vets, they're out, removed from the roster. They're debuting with I guess tonight at AEW Collision. Wasn't a long run; it was a nice run, and I am pretty disappointed in this one too. But they were never assigned here; they were just per date guys, and that's the problem with per date guys is that you give them significant TV time, and then the moment that they get the offer that they're looking for from another company, they're just gone. But they had their big 3-match series with the Rascals that I thought was very good, and then they had some trios matches with Mustafa Ali that I thought were very good. I thought this was these were guys that they could get behind and to build the division around, and now they're out, and the Machine Guns are out, and the tag team division is in dire straits once again. When earlier in the year they were really strong. Earlier in the year, you had System, Rascals, you had ABC, Grizzly Young Vets, you had the Motor City Machine, or whatever, Time Splitters. Like different times those teams were teaming. And then of course you had Kevin Knight and Kushida. So you had some pretty cool teams. And then like they just developed Speedball Mountain. Speedball Mountain was developed out of necessity to just have a pay-per-view match. It turned out to be really good. So now no more Grizzly Young Vets. You got no more Motor City Machine Guns, and it looked like ABC was on the verge of a breakup. They might have rethought that now that the Vets are out. so then you just got rid of like half your tag teams right there, and from what was once a pretty nice division, and now we're back in dire straits. So I think that subculture is coming back though. You can't have 2 British teams at once. You can only have one at a time. So I think subculture probably is going to return. I know that I think like one of those guys were injured, and that's probably why they haven't been around in a while. But yeah, I think that team probably comes back, and then that might open up the door for Mason Mansoor to finally show up. But the wrestling quality goes down quite a bit. But I think those guys are doing a good job of getting themselves over on the indies, and I think people would probably get behind those guys. I really do. Man, I'm 46 minutes in, and I still haven't even reviewed the episode. I'll get into it. I already talked about all the WWE fireds earlier in the week, but I'll go ahead and touch on some of them right now. Jinder Mahal, Sangha, and Veer. A lot of people connecting them to TNA. A lot of the people are harassing me and bullying me over this whole thing. I do see one of those people possibly coming in, and it's probably Jinder. I think it would be hilarious if AEW brought in Jinder, and that's my hope. My hope is that he goes to AEW for the jokes, but also because he had that Twitter feud that he didn't start, by the way, with Tony Khan. Like Tony Khan kind of went after the guy because Hook was getting a title shot, and people were complaining because AEW has a ranking system, and Hook was not a part of that. He was not a ranked person. So people use that to shit on the fact that Hook was getting a title shot. I think AEW's rankings are stupid because they just don't do a good job of it. So it's like if you can't do it right, just don't do it. It could be something that works, but they just don't do a good enough job, right? And they only want to use the rankings when it suits them. So it's not like a set in stone thing. And they kind of want to mix like MMA style rankings with college football rankings. So they reset the clock every year, and I was like, okay, that just doesn't work for me. There's no seasons in wrestling, but some people love them, like Joe Lanza, my boss. He's a big fan. So anyway, so people were complaining about Hook getting a title shot at Samoa Joe, and so he used that to attack the fact that Jinder Mahal also getting a title shot, assuming that everybody that says anything negative to him is a WWE fan, and that's just not true. Some of those people were AEW fans. Some of them were probably WWE bots, right? Like the Chris Legenta army coming after him. But a lot of them were just like, guy, I watch this show every week, and this doesn't make any sense to me because of the expectations that you set out. When you set out expectations and then you go against those things, and people are like, hey, we're scratching their heads. Like, what are we doing? I understood what Hook was getting a title shot. But I just don't like I didn't really care for, but I also don't like Hook. I just don't think he's very good. So that was my whole thing. But he came after Jinder Mahal, and Jinder Mahal kind of went back at him a little bit. So I think it'd be funny if he went to AEW. But you know, his uncle is Gama Singh, who used to be in TNA as a part of the Daisy Hit Squad. He was like their manager, and I could see Jinder getting a run here in TNA because TNA loves WWE fires that are complete jokes that aren't any good, and they love to bring them in. Jinder was once a world champion, but that was because they tried to go all in on leveraging India. And here's the and that what they found out, and they have completely given up on that territory, by the way, especially now that they're on Netflix. Now they're on Netflix, they don't need a TV deal in India because that covers it, right? And there's no money in India. That's like they got a billion people. None of them have any money over in that country, according to like statistics, right? According to advertising. There's a reason why a lot of YouTubers will block their videos from India and Pakistan, is because if the YouTube algorithm sees that most of the ads that you have on your video are being served in India and Pakistan, they don't think that those people are going to spend money on those ads, so you get less ad revenue. It took a while for people to figure that out, but they were thinking that there's a billion people there, you know, and there's a lot of people there that have a lot of money, but they're all at the top, right? And so just the way that the economy's set up there, like most of the people watching your videos probably don't have that much money. And that's just that, at least that's what people think. I don't know that. I don't know the economic structure of India. I don't, but WWE has given up on that territory. And TNA, that used to be a top territory for TNA, and it no longer is the case. Like they have a TV deal there, but they are not like pushing Shira, you know, like they were before, and they're not trying to do live shows there because they know that they're not going to get a return on investment. If they go to India to try to do a live show, they're just going to lose their ass in money. I think Great Khali sold like 50,000 tickets, but I don't think he made any money on it for an independent show that he did there. There's a lot of people, but the money just isn't there. And so if they did bring in Jinder, I don't think they're going to get the return that they think that they're going to get, because of the audience that he brings with him is not as valuable, like monetarily. And that's why Jinder got cut, and Sangha and Veer. And I think they had another Indian wrestler that all got cut at the same time because WWE is actively gave up on that territory. Just like they did with China. They gave up on Xia Li, right? And they had another Chinese wrestler, I think, during the last round of cuts they had given up on too. So they tried to leverage it, but now they have Netflix. They don't need it. I could see TNA trying to go for it. And I hope it works out. I'm not a fan of Jinder. I don't think he's good. I don't. He's just a guy that kind of like went through developmental and then never got better. He has basic skill set. Got a little bit of charisma, got a great look. Far as in the ring, very basic skill set. And he's just not a guy that's going to get over in the company. And it's going to be another eye-rolling thing if they bring him in. But I can see them wanting to bring him in because people like him. He is a legacy, right? Like he's like from a wrestling family. And I could see them wanting to bring him in. Veer and Sangha, I think those guys are probably retired. Especially Veer. I think Veer was a pro athlete before he came over to WWE. So I think he's retired. Von Wagner, who knows? He could I could see AEW bringing him in and kind of like part of their developmental system through Ring of Honor. I could see them giving him a shot, and Trevor Lee too. I think the perfect home for Trevor Lee is TNA because I think that like right away he becomes a valuable commodity. But I could also see him going to AEW and just kind of doing Ring of Honor stuff. So but I think Trevor Lee should come to TNA, and I think he should do the Mustafa Ali deal where he tours around and does all the top indies, because I think they would all the top indies would want to have him because he's seen as a guy that never that probably didn't get his just due in WWE. And so I think that would be cool to see him back in TNA. I mean, he's a TNA guy too. So, but he's a very good wrestler. And he's probably got a lot of friends in a lot of places. So I could see Tony Khan wanting to hire the guy, especially after I think he was like crying on Twitter. and pulling on the heartstrings of the hardcores. And Tony likes to service those people, so I could see him bringing them in. So as far as the rest of them, I don't know. I don't got anything for. Like, I don't know who Zion Quinn is. I just never seen him wrestle. So Xylee, I don't know that much about her either. So I know she knocks shit out of people. So she wasn't very good. So and that was a lot. I really do need to get to this TNA Impact episode because I am already up against the hour mark here. So let me see TNA Impact results. Let me pull this up here. I'm gonna go to TNA Wrestling because the TNA Wrestling website, this little inside baseball. When you go to the TNA Wrestling website, they don't have pop-ups, which is good. And I cannot deal with pop-ups right now with StreamYard. So, all right. So TNA Impact on Access TV results. Let's go. Boy, oh boy, do they have a lot of tweets here. Sorry, this is bad radio here. I'm gonna have to go to the Observer. Sorry, they got to go to the Observer. Let's see what they got. Let's see if their results page is better because that one was just clouded with tweets and videos. Here we go. By Jeremy Peoples, my guy. All right. Okay. So Matt Hardy has announced that his Broken Brilliance will be making an appearance, and he did. Mike Santana, Callahan will also make their tea. Oh yeah, I didn't even talk about Sami Callahan. Yeah. Well, I'll get into him later tonight. Okay, so Rebellion's biggest moments recap to start things off, and a showcase of Mustafa Ali, the return of Mike Santana, Josh Alexander's win over Hammerstone, Moose's title retention, and the return of Broken Matt. Okay, Nick Nemeth started off the show with a promo saying he's disappointed he didn't win, and his whole family was there, and he still didn't get it done. He stated that he felt broken, which then caused Broken Matt to join him and said he had a premonition. I don't know why I like the character. It makes me laugh. Premonition. However, he would be happy to give him about being the world champion, but he said sadly that Nicholas didn't win. However, he'd be happy to give him a shot when he wins it. System came out. Moose said he won, but it's 4-on-2 now, and Edwards got in a great line about Nemeth wanting to be the next Kurt Angle, but he's not even the next Eric Angle, and now Nemeth wants Edwards. Also, they also showed that that when Moose pinned Nemeth, and I don't think they should have showed this because it looks stupid. When Moose pinned Nemeth, Moose grabbed Nemeth's arm and pulled it up. So it's like, why are you doing that, Moose? But so they definitely gave Nemeth an out for losing. And I think Nemeth will be getting another title shot, probably at Hard to Kill 2025 at the Palms in Las Vegas. He's going to finish the story 1 year later. And then we get Under Siege is hyped up with the system video package before the return of Sami Callahan gets recapped. Then Jordan Grace met with Jim Miller and thanked PCO for being there and was surprised by Sami. Miyu Yamashita comes in and says that next week she's going to be getting a title shot. So there you go. All right. Mike Santana then defeats Myron Reed. Mike Santana defeats his former self in Myron Reed. Reed jumps Santana with a Yakuza kick. Yeah, so I thought this was a good short match, a showcase match for Santana. And Myron Reed's a good guy to beat right now. He's a young cat coming up, and I thought they looked good, and I thought this was a great showcase for Santana. Good stuff. And then I think after the match, so Spin the Block ended it. Fantastic short match, showcase for both Santana. Maclin came out for the post match to get to beat down Santana. He actually wanted the Rascals to help him, and the Rascals pretend like they were going to help him, and then they bailed on him. And then Santana got Maclin out of the ring. So we're going to continue with Santana and Maclin, just not Under Siege because, like Nick Nemeth, Santana is not available for Under Siege. He's got other bookings. Steph DeLander challenged Jordan Grace for a tag match with her and Khan against Grace and PCO. And Josh Alexander then came out, and Hannafin talked about the issues with Hammerstone are now over, and he can move on. He got a big walking weapon chant. Basically said he wants to be the world champion again, which caused the king of TNA, Frankie Kazarian, to come out and said that Alexander's being entitled. And Frankie said that he wants to be the champion, which then Josh Alexander basically challenged him right then, right there. They were in their street clothes, and Frankie turned him down, but a referee came out and said this match is now official. So they had the match in street clothes, and Josh Alexander got the victory and is now the number one contender, apparently. There was a lot going on in that segment. So, they wrestled in their street clothes. I don't know that it was such a street fight, but they got the match, and Josh Alexander ended up getting the victory, and is now the number one contender. I think he cashes that in Montreal, though. I don't think that I don't think he cashes it in at under. Oh, obviously not under Siege. There's already match booked, or against all odds. It's definitely he's going to do that in Canada. Makes total sense. Also after the match, Eric Young actually helped Josh Alexander because Frankie was going to cheat. Eric Young came out with a bandage on his head. Eric Young almost cut his ear off, by the way. He almost ended up like Mick Foley. That could have been bad. Santana met with Jake Something and said he isn't eligible for the ballot. So they're doing a ballot box challenge. So there's stuff in the ballot box and doing a lot of 2020 election jokes. So whoever gets the most votes from the backstage ballot box is going to be the number one contender. I found the segments to be funny, but I don't think that's a very good way to determine a contender for a wrestling championship. Just me. But I unlike JD, I happen to enjoy this Mustafa Ali character. So they did the ballot box challenge. So First Class and Bun B arrived to the building, and before meeting with Jim Miller on the ramp, Francis said that Bun B, he's a legendary rapper, came for First Class. None of the fans of B calls him Dollar as his nickname, which is great to get around the WWE owning Top Dollar. Joe Hendry came out, and Francis pointed out that they just beat him up and gave him a groin injury. Hendry told him that it's time for an apology in the ring next week. So he's going to do an apology in the ring. I actually heard that the in-ring apology was pretty fun. Ash by Elegance Concierge hyped her 5th TNA match, and it was another match by Zaya Brookside. The match was so terrible they decided to do it a second time. This match was better, but of course, Zaya Brookside got the victory now, but because of a distraction roll-up. Ash was going to hit her with the Infinity Stones. She had like a brass knuckles with jewels all over them. But the referee was taking the brass knucks away, and Zaya got the dreaded roll-up. Lazy booking. Zaya Brookside gets victory. So now we're going to have a third one at Under Siege because we don't know how to book in this company. And the audio sucked this whole night. Like every in-ring match felt like it was not in stereo, but in mono. It was terrible. A lot of time people were talking, or like the match sounded like they were underwater, like they're in a submarine wrestling. It was weird. Santino revealed that Trey Miguel won the vote by 60 votes before pointed out that there aren't even 60 people there. Ace Austin got the second highest amount of votes. Ali said there's a clear voter fraud. So 2020 election. He's playing like Donald Trump. And then Miz will face Noah and Austin, but Santino made the match Austin versus Miguel next week to determine who faces Ali at Under Siege. The Good Hands came out and said they wanted a match with Sami Callihan, who wanted to face both men. And then this subjected the world to Callahan's new theme. Sami Callihan, who is as big as a house, defeated the Good Hands, beat them both up. I don't know what they're doing with this Callahan, but my God. There's a song from Stone Temple Pilots called Dead and Bloated that he probably should come out to. And then Maclin met with Kazarian, who blew him off. So Maclin was trying to get Kazarian to have his back. But Kazarian ended up relenting. Like he blew him off first. But late, like Maclin talked him into it. So they're gonna have each other's backs. So there you go. And then we go to the main event, which I thought was a great main event, by the way. Eddie Edwards defeated Nick Nemeth with help from Moose, of course. The referee was distracted by Brian Myers and Ryan Nemeth, Nick's brother, who sucks. Not a good wrestler. I thought he was signed with AEW, but AEW probably cut bait with him. he was one of the guys that had issues with CM Punk. CM Punk confronted him too at one point and fucking kicked him off the Collision show. But it looks like he's here in TNA now, and they're going to probably do something with the Nemeth brothers. And so Brian Myers and Ryan Nemeth were fighting on the outside, causing the referee to get distracted. And while the referee was distracted, Moose came in and hit Nemeth with the belt, followed by the Boston Knee Party to get the 1-2-3. And then after the match, the system put a chair around Nemeth's neck and hit the chair with another chair and breaking his neck. And so he's going to be too injured to wrestle at Under Siege. So at Under Siege is going to be it's going to be Broken Matt and Speedball Mountain versus the System in the main event of Under Siege. Under Siege looks like death, by the way. Absolute death. So that card is like, you should not have throwaway cards on when people are paying money for it, but that's what this is. The two big matches are System versus Broken Matt and Speedball Mountain, and co-main event is Jordan Grace and PCO versus Big Con Dummy and Steph DeLander. And it looks like we're going to get Mustafa Ali versus either Austin or Miguel. Ace Austin's a babyface. You guys know where that's going. So at least that match would be good, but none of them are marquee. I'm surprised they're going to sell a single ticket in Albany, but looks like tickets are doing okay. So, but yeah, Nemeth was advertised for the match, but this attack took him out of the match. Matt Hardy replaced him. Nemeth will be in Japan, so he's not going to be able to make it. Too injured to be at Under Siege, but he's going to be in Japan. So there you go. He is the global champion there, so he's going to be defending his title. I can't remember who he's booked against. I'll try to get that information next week. But sorry for like a short recap. Wow, I did not have much time for a recap. I already went overtime because there's so much news to talk about, and I went long on all the news. So, but I thought the episode was very good. I really did like the episode. It's just the audio was just crap. Like they can't get everything right. Every week there's something. It's like if the audio and the video are good, the TV show is probably pretty bad. But if the TV show is really good, either the audio or the video is gonna suck. And that's kind of what this was. Like, I thought this was a great episode. Like, I would tell, like, I thought it was paced very well. I thought the matches are usually pretty good, but I thought the matches were good. I liked the angles. I even liked the backstage skits. I thought, well, wow, we really got something going here. I like the reintroduction of Santana. I thought he looked great. I like the opening segment with Matt Hardy and Nick Nemeth. I thought that was cool. I was like, oh, wow, we got something going here. I thought the audience was very good. And I thought the Palms looked great. Even though they only filled up half the building, I thought, wow, they got something. Like the Palms is a great home for them. The video was crisp and clear, but the audio was terrible. They just can't do everything right. They can't fire on all cylinders. They just don't have it in them. They're so prone to failure. They really are. And they're so accepting of failure that it's like become norm to them, to where they just can't please everybody. They can't do enough to please everybody. They just can't. But they got to do the basics and the small things right. Get your audio mix together and make sure your video is crisp and clear and your cameras are all color balanced. Like those things, you got to start with those things first. Like those things have to be paramount first, because without those things, it's gonna ruin the rest of the show. AEW Dynamite had a similar issue, like where their audio was jacked for the whole episode. Turns out it was a network issue, but still, it was still an issue. So when your production fails you, it doesn't matter what you put on TV. People are going to think it's less than. So you got to get those basics done correctly. If you don't do the basics right, nobody's going to care about what you're doing. Like you can have the hottest angle, but if you can't hear it, or if it sounds like it's in a submarine, it's just not going to work. And that's where they're at. So they continue. Like their production team continues to fail and continues to suck. And it's on the leadership of TNA. Now it's on Anthony Ciccione, who's head of entertainment wing of Access or of Anthem. It's on him. He needs to fire the director and get whoever's in charge of sound mixing. Like they need to just clean house. It's pathetic. It is pathetic and embarrassing to have a good show like this marred by audio issues. So anyway, guys, that is going to do it for me. Sorry, I didn't get too into the recap. That was a short recap, but I really appreciate everybody being here. Patreon.com/The Mike and JD Show, Mike and JD Show on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, share, and review and comment and all that stuff. I really appreciate it. And until next time, mahalo.